and Sarah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah ALESSIO SHEA. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Deputy Director of an environmental nonprofit called the Pennsylvania Resources Council. Not surprisingly, we're in Pennsylvania. I'm in Pittsburgh. We do have offices on the other side of the state as well, out near Philadelphia. Our big motivator, PRC has been around since 1939 for a long time, but the focus of our work changes slightly based on the needs kind of the population here. Originally, we were formed looking at roadside litter and blight, up to very serious like anti-litter campaigns that we would do into the 70s, and today is very focused on waste reduction, prevention, diversion, and doing that through a number of different access points in the community, whether it's educating youth, educating adults on how things that they can do, and then working in tandem with municipalities and counties to really try to support growing infrastructure for access, so that people have access to dispose of their materials responsibly and properly, conveniently as well. So that's one of the big things. So thanks for, having us join into this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, we're glad to have you all for sure. I think you each will, provide such a unique perspective into it, into this movement, into the general environmental movement as well. So we're really looking forward to the conversation. And I just realized I didn't introduce myself. My name is Daniella Menendez. I am she, her pronouns, and I am the outreach coordinator for Race to Zero Waste. We're a local nonprofit group located in the Bay Area. And, we do everything from waste assessments to education and outreach. We have zero waste pop-up stations. We work with municipalities in helping implement their programs and policies. So we kind of do a whole lot of things, a big umbrella of sorts around the zero waste movement. And as an organization, really, we know that obviously the people who are most impacted by climate change and the effects of pollution are those located in communities that are primarily lower income, Black and brown neighborhoods. So that's something we really want to focus on. And so that's why we really like to have a diverse group of people to have a conversation with. So let me lead that into our first question. If you can each tell us how you became involved in the zero waste movement or sustainability yourself, what moment stood out to you that made you decide to get involved? What was something that really spoke to you? And we could start with you, Frankie.
Sure. Yeah. Like I said, it's part of our culture and spirituality and our way of life, to try to leave a place better than the way that we found it. And, as time goes on, we've seen how this earth, this Mother Earth that continues to give us unconditional love, no matter how much damage we do to her, she continues to give us unconditional love and provide everything we need to sustain ourselves. And, I remember a time when Uncle told me that we had a responsibility, a commitment, a natural law that we all agree to when we come into this physical world. And I remember sitting there listening to him tell the story. I was like, oh my goodness, this is powerful, because it really sums it all up. And he says, when you come into this physical world from the spirit world, what is the first thing that you do as a human being? You're a baby, so you cry. He goes, what is crying? Breathing. And what is breathing? You breathe in, you take. You breathe out, you give back. You breathe in, you take, you breathe out, you give back. So there's an agreement, an exchange. And all that we coexist with takes what we give and then gives back what we take. There's an exchange, there's an agreement there. And, coexisting. And he says the reason why we have so many of the problems that we have today is because we've taken so much and we haven't given back as much as we've taken, and we keep taking and taking and taking. And he says, and for those that don't like laws or protocols or rules, he says, then stop breathing and see what happens. He says, you poison your water, you get sick, you're gonna die. You know, you poison your food, you're gonna get really sick, and you might die. You know, and it's just natural laws is what I saw come out of this teaching, is these natural laws that we all need to, in order to sustain ourselves and our environment, if we really want to make sure that our children have a healthy, sustainable future, which I do. And if you're a parent, I want my children to not only survive, but to thrive, right? And that means that the environment needs to be able to thrive along with them, coexisting alongside them, not dominating them. So yeah, we started, really focusing a lot on what was destroying our planet. And obviously, fossil fuels is the number one thing that has really, advanced the climate crisis into a whole new, era, where most people don't even realize that, 99% of plastics is created out of fossil fuel. And so when you start to realize how much we use this fossil fuel every day in our lives, you start to realize the impact it really has on not just our lives individually in our communities, but throughout this world, and how bad it really is. And being a maritime person, our people are ocean people, and the ocean is really sacred to us. And to see how much waste and plastic is floating around in the ocean, all over this world, it's just it's disheartening. And so finally got to a point where I said that I needed to get more involved, and in doing so, we're able to create many programs that tend to help people in our community realize how severe plastics and petrochem and all these new types of technology that they're saying can help, which is, to us, a lot of it is, rhetoric or what we call greenwashing. When you're talking about carbon capture, you're talking about, hydrogen or desalination, and they just don't realize that we live in a time where, where corporations are really, really, really starting to control our water and who gets clean drinking water and air. That's what carbon capture and desalination is really about. It's about the commodification of our water and our air, along with the land that they've already commodified. So, it's natural for us to get involved and want to be involved. And we really need to, we live in a time where we really need to pick it up a couple notches if we want our children to have that healthy, sustainable future. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
My answer.
Yeah. I mean, you nailed all the points, right? Like, you really hit it on the head. It definitely, the corporations is just more about profit over people, and it's not really considering the aftermath of everything. And it's really devastating. And just the fact that people have such a disconnect too between the products that they use every day and where they come from. They just think that they magically appear, and that's just, we all know that that's not the case. Sarah, how about yourself?
Okay. I would say one of the things, having kids definitely does change the perspective, in the future. But really, it started all with education. I was very much into biology when I was younger. And when I went to university, I chose environmental studies over straight bio. And that kind of changed the trajectory of my interest and impact from then on. And I mean, it was anything from learning about issues in southwestern PA with longwall mining of coal and the impacts that had on landowners and farmers, all the way to kind of where I ended up at PRC with a focus on the waste and the impact, learning, really just continuing, even from when I started at PRC to now, just what I've learned and about that disconnect with the materials, that we use and where they come from and their impacts. And, that there are things that, and it might sound like cliche or cheesy, but that such just simple things that we can individually do. And that we as folks in this field can educate and promote to others to really make these larger impacts. But yeah, it all really started with the education and a choice of a major that I lucked out, and I ended up just becoming very passionate about it and continuing through, people just I've met working in this field, coworkers with extensive knowledge that have just passed along information that has really, opened my eyes to awareness, and then wanting to share that awareness with others in our region and around here.
That's great. That's awesome. I feel like that was sort of my same trajectory. I also just decided to choose environmental studies. And actually, no, I was in high school and I took an environmental studies class, and I was like, this is it. Like, this is not going back. So, Alexia, how about you?
Yeah, I think for me, it also kind of goes back to like my childhood. And I think, my mom always taught us that, we aren't really separate from each other, from Mother Earth. And I think I actually moved around a little bit as a kid and kind of saw the contrast in the different places I live in, and the exposure to like pollution and all of that. And then in middle school, I kind of started with like, sustainability club at school and like installing recycle bins. And then later I was connected to Poder, which is the kind of grassroots environmental justice org in Austin. And from there, I got to learn about the environmental justice movement, the history of racism, and yeah, started doing kind of political activism. And then from there, I created my organization to make sure that, other youth also have access to that education.
Do you want to give some information to your organization? Start Empowerment?
Yeah, so basically it started off as kind of a project because most environmental education programming and curricula is really focused on the science part of it, which is extremely important. However, we also, need to talk about, the justice aspect of it, and it is a very political issue. The climate crisis is grounded in like colonial and like capitalist practices. And so I kind of saw that missing, and the small kind of like programs that, had that amazing education a lot of times were like either underfunded or were just like very grassroots. And I just wanted to make sure that more people had access to that education, because it really changed the way that I kind of understood myself as, an agent of change, and to be able to draw from that really deep history of activism in the United States was really, really inspiring. And so I wrote up a little curriculum and implemented at a school that my friend was working at the time. And then more teachers kind of started reaching out, and they were interested in implementing those lesson plans and talking about environmental justice. And so from there, we received funding and then eventually became a nonprofit. So we work with public schools, and then later we also started working in community spaces, with youth and adults alike, creating community programs. We had a summer school, and then now we also have a youth vanguard program where we not only provide workshops and like skills-based learning to the youth, but also pay them for their activism and for their work.
That's super important. I think I'm happy to know that as we progress in moving and pushing environmental agendas, that the issue of equity and environmental justice is definitely becoming more of a focus, because historically, it just hasn't been talked about at all. Even, in the zero waste movement, when we implement our programs and policies, it's to think about holistically, how is this going to be affecting everybody? Like, yes, you think you're doing a beneficial job and you're doing something that could be helpful, but maybe it will negatively impact certain communities, right? So really putting that into focus. So that's awesome that you're working so heavily in that movement. So what are you and your organization advocating for? Have you seen progress? What does progress look like to your organizations? Alexia, we could start with you since you're already unmuted.
Yeah, I think for us, we're kind of using education as the baseline to, making sure that action comes next. And so we've done kind of like measurement of like the success of our curricula, like through surveys and talking to teachers and talking to students and, asking them questions about how they've been able to change their understanding of like environmentalism and environmental justice history. And it's also been really cool to see a lot of the students just like connect the knowledge with their lived experience and kind of understand how that fits together, right? Because it's not a one-way street. We're not just teaching them something, they're actually teaching us a lot. And it's that like exchange of information that we create together. And that's led to a lot of really cool projects. We actually have a lot of like student-led school gardening programs that are like addressing food insecurity in their community. We have youth, that are working to fight the North Brooklyn pipeline, that are working to address water pollution in Texas. So there's been a lot of like really cool projects that have come out of it. And we basically just, find different ways to continue to support youth in like skills from like organizing to understanding policy to research, and connecting them with also grassroots organizations that are doing the work in their community and making sure that they get plugged into those movements. And so sometimes it's a little hard to kind of directly measure our impact. But yeah, we just like seeing kind of young people take action and really take a leadership role and be a part of those movements. We consider that really a success. And it's been just such an honor to work with such great people.
That's great. And I think, the more people getting involved, you can see that slowly progressing over time too. So you can see that impact, and you can see people pushing for environmental legislation or getting involved in their community or setting up composting programs or whatever, so that's awesome. And Frankie, how about you?
Yeah, so for us, we measure our success in like the more awareness that is brought to our communities, the better. The more involvement from our communities, the better. The more we can elevate those under-resourced and underrepresented communities, the better. And as long as we're working towards that, to us, it's always, and especially the youth, when you see youth, taking a step forward and, taking leadership roles, it's inspiring, and it makes us want to continue doing the work that we're doing. One thing I will say about that, though, is that even though it's inspiring, we tend to start going to more, high schools and universities to environmental projects and programs they got running at these schools now, even down to the elementary schools or junior high, the junior high schools. And, it's inspiring, but it's also sad to me. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like these corporations, because of the situations we're put in, they're robbing our children of their childhood. And what I mean by that is that they're forcing our young people to think about how to fix the world around them at such a younger age in life than when I was growing up. It wasn't a thing that we thought about in school, and maybe we should have. We live in this society where we're dependent on that 1%, right? That corporation, what they decide what society becomes dependent on. And I always tell people, like, we don't push down our people. We don't, condemn our people or give them a hard time to say, who recycles more or who's more environmentally friendly. I look at it like, what? Just treat this like an AA meeting. My name is Frankie. We're here to talk about environmentalism and how to fix the many different problems that we have, which I contribute to because I just flew here on a plane, or I just took an Uber, or I just bought a t-shirt at a store that has petrochemicals in it. We all contribute to the very issue that we're all addressing in some degree or another. So the thing is how do we force that 1% that decides what society becomes dependent on to make drastic, huge change, which is necessary right now. Yes, we want to do it on an individual basis as ourselves and as individuals, as families, as communities. But if we really, really look to wanting that serious change as quickly as we need it right now, we need to affect these corporations, this 1%. And the way that I've learned is affecting the money. You have to affect their money, and that's how they listen. And so, we try to find that balance. And with that balance, what I mean by that is, we created programs where we call like Return to the Earth and Mold It, where families and kids, they come together as a family, they come into the center, and they learn how to mold out of adobe or ceramics their own bowls, plates, and cups. and then after they mold them, they paint them, they decorate them, and then we fire them, of course, and they get to take them home. But in the process, we talk about why we're doing this, and because of the petrochemical industry, because of the plastics, how do we remove more of the petrochem products and plastics out of our everyday lives? And so they call it earthware. Because when you're done with it, you're basically returning the earth back to itself, back to the earth, when you're no longer using those things that they've created. So it's about, and it's a mind elder. She teaches the classes and works with the kids, talks about how she learned it the old traditional ways and how they did it in their communities. So that's what I mean about deprogramming to reprogram with some of the old teachings, and because of those old teachings was a way of showing us how to coexist and nurture and contribute to the sustainability of the environment around us that we coexist with. So those are kind of, and in that process of doing that, we didn't realize that there were certain ramifications, positive ones, that were going to come from it, which were now more community that was involved in those workshops are now like, wow, we didn't know how much it really impacted, our lives, or how much it's impacting this world, or how it's threatening, fueling the climate crisis and threatening our children's future. How do we get more involved? How do we write, city officials? How do we go up to the Capitol? People that have never even been down the Capitol halls, are now saying, hey, how do what do we do? How can we get more involved? So it's created more awareness and involvement from our community through those programs. So to us, that's a huge, anytime we get more of our community feel comfortable. And I always tell our community, when you go to the Capitol, when you go to these spaces, go as yourself, you feel comfortable. Don't go there thinking you need to make them feel comfortable because they work for you. Make them feel uncomfortable because they're the ones not doing their job. I don't get dressed up in no suit. The way you see me is the way you will see me walking down the halls of the Capitol in DC. And I do it a lot. And I say, go as yourself, let them know who they are supposed to be representing. Let them know, that they're not doing their job. And and be you, be who you are, because these individuals and these people are making decisions for communities they never even visit majority of the time, and they know. Absolutely. And there's two types of ignorance that they just need to be educated, and that's okay. But then there's ignorance by choice, and that's the one that we need to address. That systemic racism and oppression and colonial mindset that still continues to exist in our everyday lives today. So
it's it's completely insidious in our everyday lives. People don't even they can't even recognize it, and that's truly the problem. So for those of us that can, we have to continue fighting that, right? And continue trying to break down those barriers. And I think you brought up some really great points that, well, one, we have people who have been practicing holistic, with nature types of living for so long, so why aren't we lending advice or getting advice from Indigenous communities around the world who have been doing this for centuries? They know the practices, they've been living in harmony. So why aren't we accessing that? And then I think you also brought up another really great point about, the 1%, the corporations, the people who are doing and who are polluting and emitting the most GHG emissions are the ones that aren't being held accountable. I think that there's a fine balance between, having our own personal accountability. But again, if you're going to the grocery store and all you see is plastic and you have to feed your family, what are you going to do? Right. And so we need to really start creating those people who are creating it accountable. Sarah, how about yourself? Do you want me to repeat the original question as well? Because we've kind of swayed a bit. What are you and your organization advocating for? Have you seen progress, and what does progress look like?
So PRC, Pennsylvania Resources Council, is advocating for, the reduction of waste. And one, can we prevent it from even being generated in the first place? That's the key. And then if we are generating material, which, not to, I think Frankie's point, we're all part of the problem. We don't, somebody will bring a coffee cup that they didn't have their travel mug, and they're like, oh, like at work, like, oh no, it's like, it's okay. Like we're all human. So we want to try to reduce as much as possible and promote that and educate. And then also for the waste that is generated, or the material that's generated, how do we divert as much as possible? How do we reach people where they are to have the options, the convenient options, the responsible options to recycle, to compost, and, to the point of having those options in the first place. Sometimes, you can only do so much on an individual level. There needs to be, I can't make the choice individually myself, what's going to be in front of me, or is my community, do they have a place I can, drop off my material? Do I live in a neighborhood or an area that doesn't have mandatory recycling? And so PRC tries to work a lot of times, what can the individual do? And then trying to work with communities, municipalities, counties within the state of Pennsylvania to provide support on creating infrastructure. So where those gaps are, we can, find accessible, glass recycling, because it's all going to go back to, reducing new products we're making, reducing greenhouse gases, and trying to, reach out to the public to realize the connection between waste and waste generation and greenhouse gas and, pollution in our environment. Because somebody made the comment, and we've all heard this, that the disconnect and I put it out at the curb and it goes away, and I don't see it, whether it goes to the recycling center, whether it goes to the landfill, it's not my problem anymore. Or that's, and so how do we, try to educate? We talk a lot about at PRC, we can set up a system, and there's going to be a percentage of the population that are motivated, and they're going to do it. They don't care if they're going to do it anyways. And there might be a percentage that we're never going to get to, but there's this giant in the middle. And how do we hook and get them to realize their impacts, and that there are things that they can do? And, it's education, it's involvement, it's showing them, passion, it's providing them convenience, all different things. But that's kind of what PRC is trying to kind of, be in that space. And I think we are seeing, progress in ways that, one very specific example, glass was taken out of our curbside recycling in a certain area. And we started to work with municipalities to implement drop-offs, so people don't have to drive, and we were like, are people really going to do that? Are they going to take the time to store it? And overwhelmingly, I mean, we're still only hitting a percentage of the population, but people are willing to do it because they, see the connection and the value of doing it. And so how do we continue? The next step is like, well, how do we continue to reach those people that we're not? A lot of the ways, and it's not a perfect way, that we show, I think, to our progress, which can sometimes be good or bad, is the weight or the diversion that we took from a large event that we did. What percentage did we save from going to the landfill? I think it's also hard, though, to know, if reduction in the first place is our ultimate goal, relying on weights and tonnages at the end, we actually want to see those go down in the long run, because we don't want people to be generating. So it's not a perfect system as far as, looking at how do we tell progress. But I think the interest and participation and number of folks who call us asking questions, and even the frustrations, hearing frustrations, people who want to do X and there's barriers, and knowing that there's people care, like they're frustrated, they want a solution, and how do we kind of support them in, getting to that solution?
Absolutely. I feel like one of the things that I saw the most whenever I was doing outreach in San Francisco was people who didn't have the programs and policies that were surrounding them. And of course, these were mainly low-income housing sites. And their dire want to participate, but them actually not having the physical infrastructure to be able to participate. And that's something that we see across the board, all over the United States, all over the world. So it's, again, pulling in those people and how do we set them up for success? Because, people do care. They do care about the environment. I think that there is a very much like an innate feeling that everyone shares, but it's whether it's accessible for them, and that's a large part of the conversation. So with that, how do you get people involved? How do you ask for support? And then what do you say to the skeptics? People, there's always going to be people that are skeptical of you or just naysayers in general. So what do you do for them? Or how do you kind of get past that point? Alexia?
Yeah, first, I just want to say really quickly, I loved Frankie's point about kind of like youth activism, because I think it's really important not to glorify it. Because I think sometimes I see that happening in the media. And it's honestly, it's really sad, especially just like thinking about like elementary school and like middle schoolers, like attending protests and like skipping school and things like that. But to answer your question, I mean, I think it's really important to meet people where they're at. And that's kind of the conclusion that I've come to, at least with the people that I work with and with my community. And I think a lot of times I use health as the way to kind of talk about environmental issues and connect about climate change, because I think health is something that everyone can kind of understand and is, very closely tied to obviously like pollution and climate change as well. And it's like a good way to kind of have the conversation started and kind of connect, community members with what's happening in the climate legislation and like mobilizing folks. But I really do believe in the power of like community organizing. And I think, I don't know if y'all heard like, or were involved with like the recent victory with like stopping Manchin's dirty deal. And I think that was kind of a beautiful example of like the environmental justice community really coming together, like thousands of groups really mobilized and, used like digital media, lobbying, politics, going door to door, really kind of mass mobilization of people. And I think it's really important to create those community networks and those strong communities to be able to have that movement and to be able to have that coming together and that success. So I think that's kind of my philosophy around it.
That's great. Do you mind going into what you were advocating for? I don't think I heard it. I think I missed it.
Like the Manchin's dirty deal example, or?
Yeah. Do you mind going into that a bit more?
Yeah, so that was kind of like a recent victory. So it started in September. We found out that basically to pass the IRA, there was a back deal that was kind of done. And Manchin was going to pass this bill and attach it to the continuing resolution, which is basically the budget that has to get passed in September or else the government shuts down. And part of the bill was leaked and it had, watermarks from the American Petroleum Institute. And the bill, was very disastrous. It would basically advance, fossil fuel interests in the Mountain Valley Pipeline. And essentially at the beginning of the month, we were told it's not really possible to stop this bill. Like it's kind of a deal that was done. And also no one's going to want to risk a government shutdown regardless of, political party. But I think the environmental justice movement really came together and we're like, no, we're not letting this pass. And, folks started mobilizing in communities. Like there were thousands of phone calls and letters sent. And then we got, I think 77, Congress representatives to sign a letter and then like senators as well. And it eventually got taken out. And it's definitely coming back again, I'm sure, in the next few months. So it's not a battle that's been lost, but I feel like it's kind of like a recent victory that really shows the power of like community organizing. And it's really decades of people, building their community and getting to know their neighbors and building those networks that led to this possible victory.
That's awesome. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And the fact, even though it's like a small victory for now, it kind of gives people hope that even though it might be slow progress, things can change, right, for the better. So that's really awesome. Congratulations on that. Frankie, how about yourself? And let me know if you need me to repeat the question.
No, I think I get it. I'm going to piggyback a little bit off of Alexia. She brought up some good points. The IRA bill really was damaging to our community because it threw the Gulf, Texas and Louisiana, the Appalachians and Alaska, the Arctic Refuge under the bus, made it sacrifice zones for the betterment of other communities. And many people don't realize how damaging that was And so, yeah, it wasn't a small victory. It was a big victory, because it does show, with this mentioned bill, that, there can be some change if we can come together and really push for it, and keep the messaging the same, and really stand in solidarity. And so, it's important for that. And so, yeah, I wanted to say that. And I also wanted to say, when it comes to our youth, what I always say, and I hope you do this for yourself, when I speak about how our youth are having to deal with issues that they shouldn't have to be dealing with at such a young age, I say shame to us, that generation before you, for not taking care of those issues during our time when we can make that drastic change. So I always say to when I speak in front of the California Coastal Commission or the TCEQ or any of these officials, I always say, if you can't realize, the severity of the change that we need today, when we're talking about the climate crisis that we're in, then I pray that your children hold you accountable for what you do or do not do today. So I always say that, because I think they have every right to, because we know, and that's why, I would say to your question, that I believe that there's two types of ignorance: the ignorance of those that just need to be educated because they don't know, and that's okay. And then there's that ignorance by choice, which we just don't have time for. Straight up, we don't have the time for that type of ignorance, and we're going to continue to move forward. We're going to continue to address the issues and try to create, systemic change that's necessary to push to that transition of a healthier, sustainable future. We have to, they're going to use multiple different tactics. Everybody talks about, not everybody, but when it's mentioned, when the people talk about historical trauma, right? I say, there's no such thing as historical trauma, because that means it was left in our past. It's just trauma because it still exists today. Just different tactics, different approaches, different processes and how they implement these things. And if you look at the laws, you look at the policies, you got to use every tool necessary, whether it's locking down and stopping work and creating OSHA to come down and look at what's happening, affecting the money, defunding, policy work. Every single one of them is a tool in the toolbox to try to stop this climate crisis that we're in. And, we work really hard. I work really hard to make sure I try to use all those tools necessary, which is one of the reasons why I go to DC when I'd rather not go to DC and walk down those halls. But I do it because I want to be able to look at my kids, when they're older and they're, working with their kids and going to protests and rallies. And, I want them to look at me and know that I tried everything humanly possible and I used every tool necessary that was available to me to try to make change. But hold me accountable, hold us accountable, continue to hold us accountable, and continue to keep doing the good work. I tell the youth all the time, what's going to make change is this. What we're doing today and what the youth are doing today by gathering and speaking and talking to one another and taking initiative and putting their feet on the ground and telling us to wake up, and to make this change, because this is what they want. So, yeah, I think that would be kind of my answer to it. Don't keep doing what you got to do, and keep doing what is necessary, and work for that solidarity and that passion, that love that you have for that healthy, sustainable future that you look for that next generation, for all people, not just one demographic, not just one community, not just one part of the world, but the world. Because it was that way once before, and it can be that way, and we can live in a good way and in a healthy, sustainable way if we want to. So. Totally.
Absolutely. So Sarah, we're going to have you answer the question, and then we actually have some questions from YouTube. So I think Hayden got us up and running. So we have some questions for people watching the live stream. So Sarah, how about you?
As it relates to kind of like how we connect and, try to hook, I guess, people into what our message is a lot of education and access, I think. And really, since some of what we do is direct service for it, so we're going to hold a collection event somewhere, and part of it is that people just want to get rid of their TV. Like they just, I can't put it out of my curb, but if we can hook them, so we're providing you this service and we're going to make sure that it is responsibly recyclable, that we use, third party, it's not going overseas. But if we can kind of capture you while you're there and try to push you to want to learn a little bit more, just trying to expand maybe those groups of people that it's not front of mind and they're utilizing some of our programming as almost like a service. But how do we push past that and get them to realize, the impact of what they're doing? And then, oh, well, what's the next thing I can do? Well, what else, and trying to really kind of hook people in that regard and trying to make sure that, and we don't always succeed, I think, at this, but trying to make sure that the programming and the services we provide are accessible to multiple different populations in the region, that we are. And we run into issues with a lot of our events are vehicle driven. You have to have a car to come through. And so, how do we overcome, those kinds of barriers that, we ourselves as an organization have inadvertently put into place by setting certain up. And so, we really continue to work at expanding that, because the larger the access points, the more likely we're going to be reaching, more people where they are with that message and providing them services that will hopefully, continue to have them wanting to do more and continuing to kind of grow and what the impact that they're trying to make.
Absolutely. I mean, that again goes back to, you think that you're creating a beneficial program or something for the community, and then there's just these things that just aren't really thought out or like not thought about initially, and that creates barriers for folks. It's hard. It's kind of it's a dancing act. I feel like it's really hard to try to do that. All right. So from YouTube, we have one question. What's one thing a person watching can do to help spread the zero waste movement and underserved communities? If you have to give advice for a first step or one action. And Sarah, we can start with you since you were the last to speak.
So what's one thing that folks, could you repeat it again, that they can do?
Yeah. So what's one thing a person watching can do to help spread the zero waste movement in underserved communities? If you have to give advice for a first step or one action, what would it be?
And I think one thing that I've learned and our organization learned is really seeing what the needs of that community is. It's not that, we have a set of programs or services, but environmentalism and advocacy, it's not obviously a one size fits all type of system, and that the needs of one neighborhood in City of Pittsburgh is different to the needs of a community right outside. And so really kind of being on the ground level and talking to those that live and breathe in that community to really then find out, okay, well, how can we, with what you need and what the resources, that hopefully we have, how can we make that change? But really ensuring, starting out at that level of what is the need and what resources do you not have that we can kind of support you on.
Alexia?
100% agree with what that was being said. I think an easy way also is to kind of Google like what existing environmental organizations are in your community and kind of get plugged into the network. And then I feel like once you like reach out to one or like show up to a meeting, then you kind of start to get to know the people and the different groups, and you can kind of see, what you want to plug into or what gaps exist and things like that.
And Frankie, we actually have a specific question for you. Are tribal governments creating zero waste policies? Do you know about this happening in your community?
Yeah, so I'm very blessed and fortunate to visit many reservations through ceremonies and gatherings and families living in different different places. And yeah, I can definitely say, even Standing Rock, that many people know of, that sparked a lot of this new environmental movement of defend the sacred, and water is life, and it sparked a lot of new how can I say movements towards breaking away from a system that has made them become dependent and has forced them in many ways to become dependent on that kind of waste and what is determined to be a way of life that they need to be dependent on because of what the 1% or this society and this government has made them believe is the only way, or the way that they need to live. And so with that, you're seeing a lot of more green energy practices and projects being put into place when it comes to homes that are being built now in a more sustainable way. You got solar now being implemented. You have a lot more food sovereignty projects happening where they're growing their own foods and composting, re-educating and teaching their youth about some of the old traditional ways of where their food and their everyday needs come from. Because we all know, obviously, when a home is hurt economically, one of the first things that goes is the fresh produce, the healthy foods, right? They go towards the processed and the canned because it could feed more, feed longer. And so it's really been a thing, even for us. We take fresh produce to elders and wisdom keepers and large families that are struggling in our communities. We deliver that every other week, 50 pounds of it to those individual homes, because their health shouldn't be threatened like that. And so yeah, there has been a lot of movement on many of the different reservations on moving towards more zero waste practices, because the things that we're trying to adopt are things that just get recycled right back into the earth. Or moving more towards a green energy, whether it be wind or solar or bio. They're looking for different. There's now more movement on trying to educate our youth and people on the reservations, on and off, that are from the reservations and those communities to educate more of these types of things that break away from that hold of corporations. So that we can have more of an autonomy over how we move forward living our daily lives. So yeah, definitely there is.
That's great to hear. And I think that's just something that, for me, why I love this movement so much, why I love zero waste so much, is because it really just touches upon every aspect of our lives. It goes into environmental justice issues, it goes into pollution, it goes into the science and the nuance of GHGs emissions, or like Superfund pollution sites, or anything. It really just is all encompassing. So yeah, I think it's great to hear that in all of your communities, we're spread out right now across the US, that there is some action progressing towards a zero waste lifestyle and zero waste movements, and holding those accountable who are really doing the most damage to us and our health and the health of our planet. So I appreciate you all so much for taking the time and meeting with us. And, I just want to let you know that our listeners also are really, really appreciative of all of you, and that you're working so hard on the health and accountability and removing barriers and getting people involved, getting people really on the grounds, making change, going to Washington, D.C. and doing what you have to do. So we really appreciate that. And if you would like, I'm just going to do a little plug for Zero Waste, #Zero Waste Month. Please share and spread the message so that for the next 3 weeks, we have different things happening for each week. And so you can get more information at zerowastemonth.org as well. And so thank you so much again. We really appreciate your time, and it was great connecting and meeting you all. Do you have any last words, last comments?
I say, as much as of a need that we have to make drastic change in our lives, don't forget that life is precious. It's a gift, and to celebrate it just as much.
100%. Alexia?
I mean, I feel like that should just be the last message now. But thank you for like creating this space. Yeah, for this wonderful conversation.
And Sarah, do you have anything?
Yeah, thanks for having on, but I would agree. It was a great way to end it. And it was great to meet Frankie and Alexa as well.
Yes, absolutely. Elders have always said, this is the last one, I'm sorry, that the most precious gift you can give to another human being is time out of your life. So the time that you've given today is a gift. So thank you for that gift, and continue giving those gifts, because that's how we'll make change for our next generation. So I appreciate your time and those gifts. Thank you.
100%. Thank you both, all of you, so much. Really appreciate it. And let's keep fighting that good fight. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.